Say tourists shall be allowed entry in the country subject to the guidelines as may be finalized and approved.
Hello everyone, welcome to Life in the Philippines News. I'm BobbieD. Today's headline, New Philippines Travel Update.
Say tourists shall be allowed entry in the country subject to the guidelines as may be finalized and approved by the IATF basta mula sa green list. And speaking of guidelines, the following interim testing and quarantine protocols of international arriving passengers were approved yesterday and will be implemented beginning November 22, 2021. They are as follows. For fully vaccinated Filipinos coming from green list countries who have not taken an RT-PCR test 72 hours prior to their departure, they must undergo facility-based quarantine with on-arrival RT-PCR testing until the release of their negative results. After this, the individual is enjoined to self-monitor until the 14th day of their arrival, with the date of arrival being the first day. If a fully vaccinated Filipino has taken a negative test within 72 hours prior to departure from a green list country, no facility-based quarantine and no on-arrival RT-PCR test will be required. Pumunta naman po tayo sa mga fully vaccinated foreigners coming from green list. A negative RT-PCR test shall be required to be taken within 72 hours prior to departure. And upon arrival, no facility-based quarantine and no on-arrival RT-PCR test will be further required, but the passenger is enjoined to self-monitor for any symptoms until the 14th day. Again, with the first day being the date of arrival. Meanwhile, for unvaccinated, partially vaccinated, or individuals whose vaccination status cannot be independently validated, and those vaccinated but failed to comply with the above test before travel requirements, facility-based quarantine will be required until the release of their negative RT-PCR test taken on the 5th day, after which they are enjoined to self-monitor until the 14th day of their arrival from a green list country. All passengers, whether Filipinos or foreigners, merely transiting through non-green list jurisdiction shall not be deemed as having come from or having been to the said country, territory, or jurisdiction if they stayed in the airport the whole time and were not cleared for entry by its immigration authorities. Pumunta naman po tayo sa yellow list. For fully vaccinated individuals coming from yellow list countries, a negative RT-PCR test conducted within 72 hours prior to departure from the country will be required. Upon arrival, they shall undergo facility-based quarantine with a third day RT-PCR test, with the date of arrival considered the first day. Upon release of a negative RT-PCR test, they may be discharged from facility quarantine, after which they are enjoined to self-monitor up to the 14th day from date of arrival. On the other hand, fully vaccinated individuals from yellow list nations without a negative pre-departure test shall be required to undergo facility-based quarantine with a 5th day RT-PCR test, with the date of arrival considered the first day. Upon the release of a negative RT-PCR test, they may be discharged from facility quarantine, after which they shall be required to undergo home quarantine until the 10th day from date of arrival from a yellow list country. Individuals who are unvaccinated, partially vaccinated, or whose vaccination status cannot be independently validated are to undergo facility-based quarantine with an RT-PCR test done on the 7th day, with date of arrival being the first day. So 7th day, no? Upon the release of a negative RT-PCR test, individuals shall be required to undergo home quarantine until the 14th day from date of arrival. Sa red list naman. Sa red list, inbound international travel of all persons, regardless of vaccination status, coming from or who have been to red list territory within the last 14 days prior to arrival to any port of the Philippines shall not be allowed. Only Filipinos returning to the country via government-initiated repatriation, non-government-initiated repatriation, and bayanihan flights may be allowed entry subject to a 10-day facility-based quarantine upon arrival. Passengers, whether Filipinos or foreigners, merely transiting through red list nations shall not be deemed as having come from or having been to said country, territory, jurisdiction, or if they stayed in the airport the entirety of their layover and were not cleared by its immigration authorities. Upon arrival in the Philippines, passengers who merely transited through a red list nation shall comply with existing testing and quarantine protocols. Testing and quarantine protocols of minors shall follow. Ito, importante to. Ulitin natin. Testing and quarantine protocols of minors shall follow the testing and quarantine protocols of the parent or guardian they are traveling with, regardless of the minor's vaccination status and country of origin.
Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any update coming from Live in the Philippines News. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Hey, don't forget, check out some of our other cool videos. And if you like the video, hit the subscribe button.